Hi, I want to ask you something. If you served in the military or if someone you love did and you spent years feeling like something is just off, like your brain doesn't work the way other people's do, I need you to stay with me for the next 12 minutes because what I'm about to share could change the way that you understand yourself or someone you care about completely. Now, I'm not talking about weakness. I'm not talking about an excuse. I'm talking about the neurological reality that the military mental health system has largely missed. And that has left thousands of veterans struggling in silence. I know because I was one of them. In my last video, I shared my story. Desert Storm, 30 years of struggling without a name for it, and finally discovering I had ADHD while earning my PhD in health psychology. A lot of you reached out after that, and the message that I received said two things over and over again. Number one, it was, I thought I was the only one. And number two, how did nobody catch this? Well, that second question, that's what this video is all about, because the answer matters. And it's not just as simple as, the VA dropped the ball. The truth is more complicated and honestly, a lot more interesting. So let's talk about masking the problem. Here's the first thing that you need to understand. Military training is one of the most effective ADHD masking systems ever invented. Think about what basic training does. It gives you structure. It gives you a clear chain of command. It gives you immediate consequences for every action. It removes ambiguity. It tells you exactly where to be, what to wear, what to do, and when to do it. And for a brain with ADHD, a brain that struggles to create its own structure, regulate its own attention, and manage its own time, that environment is almost like a prosthetic. It's great. The military provides externally what the ADHD brain can't generate internally. So what happens? The veteran performs. They function. They may even thrive. And nobody, not their commanding officer, not the military medical system, and not even the veteran themselves, ever suspects ADHD. Because on the surface, everything looks fine until they're discharged and they go home. This is what I call the transition crisis. The day a veteran leaves active duty, the scaffolding comes down, the structure disappears, the external regulation is gone, and the ADHD brain, which was never actually healed, it was just supported, is suddenly on its own. And that's when the wheels start to come off. Difficulty holding jobs, trouble in relationships, inability to managing finances, feeling like you've lost the person that you were in the military, restlessness, irritability, the sense that you should be able to handle even civilian life. It's supposed to be easier than that, right? But somehow you can't. And because these symptoms look a lot like PTSD, and because PTSD is the very first thing that every clinician looks for when a veteran walks in the door, ADHD gets missed every single time. Now this is the PTSD overlap. This is important because now I want to be careful here because this is where it gets nuanced. PTSD and ADHD can absolutely coexist. In fact, research suggests that they do co-occur in veterans at rates far higher than the general population. Now, some estimates put it at nearly 50% of veterans with PTSD also have ADHD. But here's the problem. The symptoms overlap in ways that make differential diagnosis incredibly difficult because both PTSD and ADHD can cause difficulty concentrating. Both can cause hypervigilance. That constant sense of scanning your environment, both can cause impulsivity, both can disrupt sleep, both can cause emotional dysregulation, and what looks like rage or irritability or even shutting down. And when a veteran sits across from a clinician and they're showing all of these symptoms and they have a combat history, PTSD is the default diagnosis. It's the loudest explanation in the room and nobody looks further. That veteran may spend years, sometimes decades, in PTSD treatment that helps some of the things, but doesn't touch others because they're treating one condition while another condition goes completely unaddressed. So what does ADHD actually look like for a veteran? Well, it's not in a textbook. I know, because I spent years in school becoming a doctor. What does it look like in real life? Well, I'm going to give you a list, and I want you to be honest with yourself as I go through it. So here are the signs that often get missed. 1, you were high performing in the military, but feel like you can't function in civilian life. The structure is gone and you don't know how to replace it. People tell you, just get organized, man, and you just want to scream. 2, you start things you don't finish. Projects, jobs, relationships, hobbies. There's a graveyard of half-finished things in your life and you don't understand why. 3, you're either hyper-focused on something, completely absorbed, hours disappear, or you can't focus at all. There's almost no middle ground. 4, time doesn't work right for you. You're either late to everything or you arrive 2 hours early because you can't calibrate it. The concept of in about an hour feels genuinely foreign. And 5, your emotions are intense, not just PTSD intense. Everything is amplified. Frustration becomes rage, excitement becomes obsession, disappointment feels catastrophic. This is called emotional dysregulation, and it's one of the least talked about symptoms of ADHD. And 6, you self-medicate. Alcohol, nicotine, stimulants, even extreme exercise. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is searching for the dopamine it can't naturally regulate well. ADHD brains are dopamine deficient, and substances fill that gap in ways that feel at first like relief. And then 7, you've been told your whole life that you're not living up to your potential, that you're smart but unfocused, that you're capable but inconsistent, that you could do more if you just tried harder. That last one, that one right there, that's the one that does the most damage. In my last video, I introduced the biopsychosocial model, the BPS model, as the framework that I use to understand ADHD. And I want to apply it specifically to veterans right now because it changes the whole picture. Let's first talk about the biological layer. Biologically, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition. The prefrontal cortex, front part of your brain. This part of the brain is responsible for executive function, impulse control, attention regulation, and emotional management. Is structurally and functionally different in people with ADHD. This is not a choice for those folks, for us folks. This is not a character flaw. This is a hardware malfunction. And combat exposure or any trauma exposure, and many people have had trauma outside of combat, the stress hormones, the traumatic experiences, the constant threat environment can actually compound these neurological differences. And trauma changes the brain chemically, and so can years of untreated ADHD. So now let's talk about the psychological layer. Psychologically, most veterans with undiagnosed ADHD have spent their entire lives developing a story about themselves. And that story usually includes words like lazy and undisciplined, not smart enough and broken. Well, that story is wrong. but it is deeply embedded, and it drives depression, anxiety, and substance use and relationship problems in ways that have nothing to do with the combat and everything to do with a brain that was never properly understood. And then we have the social layer. Socially, veterans are already isolated by the civilian-military divide. Add undiagnosed ADHD, the impulsivity, the emotional volatility, and the inconsistency, and you get relationships that break down, careers that stall, and a growing sense of not belonging anywhere. The BPS model says you cannot treat this by addressing only one layer. Medication alone won't work. Talk therapy alone won't work. Community alone won't work. You need all three working together with someone who understands the full picture. And that's what I do. And that's what this channel is about. So if you've been nodding along to this video, if you recognize any of these 7 signs, and if they've landed, if you've been carrying a diagnosis or even no diagnosis that hasn't felt quite right, here's what I want you to do. Step 1, take this seriously. ADHD is not a childhood condition that you outgrow. It's a lifelong neurological reality that looks different at different stages of life. Adults, especially high-performing adults like veterans, are chronically undiagnosed, and if you suspect it, pursue it. Step 2, get a proper evaluation. A proper ADHD evaluation is not a 10-minute questionnaire. It involves a comprehensive clinical interview, a review of your history, and ideally input and taken by somebody who knows you well and knows ADHD. The VA does offer ADHD evaluations, but the wait times can sometimes be very long, and a private psychologist or a psychiatrist can typically move faster, to be honest, and I love the VA system. I've had so many surgeries there, it's changed my life. But for mental health sometimes, you know, typically an outside psychologist or psychiatrist can be a faster move. What you're looking for is a clinician who understands both PTSD and ADHD, and definitely won't default to one at the expense of the other. Step number 3, grab my free chapter. I wrote ADHD and Emotional Mastery specifically for adults who have been struggling without answers. The free chapter alone will give you language for what you've been experiencing, and that language matters. When you can name it, you can start to address it. The link is in the description, so there's no cost and there's no catch. Now, I want to leave you with something that I wish someone had said to me 30 plus years ago in 1991 when I was discharged from the service. And that is that you are not broken. You are not lazy, and you are not failing to try hard enough. You have a brain that works differently. And for a long time, the world, including the military, including the medical system, didn't have the language or the tools to see that clearly. But we have them now, and you don't have to keep figuring this out alone. If this video helped you, or if it made you think of someone who needed to hear it, please share it. Not for me, but for them. Please subscribe if you want to keep going deeper on this. Every week, I'm going to bring you some real information backed by real science from someone who has lived this and has spent 30 years in a clinical setting or searching the setting and trying to understand what was wrong with my brain. So I will see you in the next one.